Bible study with Zion Baptist Church. This Look into the Word is led by our pastor, Reverend Dr. Keith W. Byrd Sr. Pastor Byrd is using the moment to deepen our relationship with God by fostering a relationship with God's Word.
It's drastically changed my life.
The aim and goal is for each disciple to be pushed and challenged and ultimately changed by the study of God's Word. This is an interactive forum where we sharpen one another while going deep in God.
God knows what He's doing. I have faith in God.
Bring your Bibles, a pen, and an open spirit along with your questions and join us in our weekly journey.
Praise God and welcome to another edition of Wednesday Evening Bible Study. My name is Keith Byrd and I am the proud and humbled pastor of the Zion Baptist Church located at 4850 Blagden Avenue in beautiful Northwest Washington, D.C. Welcome, welcome, welcome all of you who are joining us virtually. Thank God for you and your presence, for thinking it not robbery to be a part of our Bible study this evening. We welcome those who are in the virtual space as well as those who are in the sanctuary proper. We thank God for them for keeping the pastor company here in the sanctuary. And you have time. I used to hear this on the radio. You still have time. Make your way down to the sanctuary tonight. We would love to have you. God bless you. We thank God for those in the upper room. Helga Jackson used to sing, "We're in the upper room." And so we thank God for the upper room, AKA also known as the skybox. We give God glory and honor for them and their skills and gifts that make this broadcast, this telecast possible. So I greet you tonight with Jesus' joy, and I'm excited about another opportunity to share with you. Let's begin our time together tonight in prayer. Gracious God, our Father, we love you tonight. We bless your holy and righteous name, for you are worthy to be praised. Yes, from the rising of the sun to the going down of the same, you are so worthy to be praised. Thank you, God, for allowing us yet another opportunity to share and to glean gold nuggets from your holy word. Be with us tonight. Guide our conversation tonight as we continue to talk about this church militant and all that you are expecting of us in this season, that we might be found faithful stewards according to your word. Have your way, God. We thank you in advance for the fruit of our time together, for it is in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. Amen. And so the church militant, we still talking about the church militant, and still I hope you are, as you continue to review Strive Towards Freedom, that you are feeling what I'm feeling, and even more so. I'm telling you tonight, I'm asking you, I'm soliciting your prayers from the beginning of Bible study, because I'm struggling with something. And what I'm struggling with, and struggling not to do it, but everything in me wants to address it, but I'm kind of struggling not to do it. But it ties in so closely with the church militant. It ties in so closely with the very things that I think the church needs to be a part of in terms of the Christian church, the black church, as it relates to prejudice and racism and systems of oppression, misunderstandings, rhetoric that creates oppression, and this notion of cancel culture. So I'm tempted to deal with it. And if I fall to temptation tonight, I pray your indulgence. And you're probably thinking, well, Pastor, what are you talking about? I'm talking about this situation involving Kyrie Irving, and I'm talking about some of the questions, comments that I'm hearing in my small little area of influence, and also what I'm reading about the situation, and many of you may be more familiar with it than I am. but it certainly has reached my attention. We have a tech support question. Upper room, to serve.
I'm just going to tell you, yield not to temptation, for yielding is sin. You know, ask the Savior to help you, comfort, strengthen, and keep you. You know, that's where we are right now. Bring up a hymn of the church for you, brother. That's all.
God bless you, Doc. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. Great hymn guy, just like Pastor. First of all, how many of you have heard about that are listening with us today? The Anti-Defamation League obviously is involved in it, as it is their mission to certainly protect and come against any attacks, not just on the Jewish people, but on any people. They're supposed to be representing all people against oppression and oppressive systems and racial inequity at any rate, at any point around the world. And so we certainly salute the Anti-Defamation League's efforts in this regard. But my understanding is that there is a film that is on Amazon that Kyrie Irving posted a link to that particular film, and that film at its core, I haven't seen it, I'm just going by what I read, is anti-Semitic in nature and makes a lot of bogus claims, one of which, I guess the most egregious and offensive would be that the Holocaust never happened. And so, of course, he has been suspended by the NBA, by the New Jersey Nets, and what I heard today was there's 6 things that he has to do in order to return to his basketball career with the New Jersey Nets. And thank you, Reverend Rob. I'm not familiar with this movie. I'm not promoting this movie. So I don't know anything about it, but I do know that it is on Amazon, and the Anti-Defamation League and others have also appealed to Amazon to remove it. So I'm not promoting any of that. I guess what I'm concerned about, and as a church militant, if we don't tackle these issues, who's going to tackle them? If we don't speak to them, who's going to speak to them? And this is not in support of anybody, because I don't know what's going on totally. I'm just reading about it and hearing about it. But what I am concerned about, and I'm just going to say it and we can move on. I am concerned about this notion that some groups' hurt is more highly valued than other groups' hurt. That some groups' pain seems to bear more consequences than other groups' pain. I would be disingenuous as your pastor if I didn't tell you that I'm concerned about it. And you know I'm concerned about it because I felt the same way with some of Whoopi Goldberg's comments that were put in the category of anti-Semitic, but I thought they were true and not anti-Semitic, but truth. And it seems, and I want to get your comment on it because we're talking about the church militant, we're talking about standing up against oppressive systems, and sometimes we've got to help other oppressed groups understand that nobody's hurt should be diminished by the other person's hurt, and we ought not be comparative with our hurt. I hurt, you hurt, and the oppressive system caused the hurt. We shouldn't turn our hurt on one another and begin to use our hurt as a form of prejudice against the other people. That's what I'm saying tonight, clearly. I want to be clear what I'm saying. I'm against anti-Semitism. I'm against people doing things to Jews, saying things about Jews, violence against Jews. All of those things are horrible, and I'm against it against black people. What I'm having a problem with is when I hurt and I say ouch as a black person, we don't get as much, I'm just being honest, in my opinion, we don't get as much public outcry. But when we get something that is classified as anti-Semitic, we get a lot of consequences to it. And I just want to make sure that we're not putting one group's pain over another group's pain. And so there are a number of us on here. I'd like to hear from some of the folks on here to see if you even have heard about this, and to see where your interest is. Reverend Rob, let me let some of these other people say something real quick. But if there anybody else on here who has heard about this, and just what are your thoughts about it? Because I am becoming quite concerned about it. Deacon Frank Joe?
Well, yes, I've heard about it, and I just wonder if the Constitution applies to him as well as it does to everybody else. It seems like to me this is a freedom of speech thing.
The film itself that's on Amazon?
No, what he did, it seemed like freedom of speech to me.
Right. Well, my understanding was he didn't make any comments with the post. He just, I mean, I may not have all the information. He just posted it and put a link to the this particular movie that's on Amazon and how you could get it. So I don't know his full piece. And again, I can't even speak in support of him because I don't know all that he did. But I am concerned about sort of the consequences he's facing. So yeah, I don't know.
I am too.
Yeah.
To me, these are some pretty serious consequences.
Yeah. One of them was
his constitutional rights.
Right. One of them was to ask him to give $500,000. So I understand that could be propaganda to.
It was my understanding they said they weren't going to accept it because they didn't feel that his apology was sufficient and something of that nature.
Yeah. And the reason I raised this, thank you, Deacon Joe, the reason I raised this because it's a problem. It's a problem in D.C. Many of you in D.C. may remember when council member for Ward 8, Trayon White, was accused of saying some anti-Semitic things, and he was almost, run out of the city. And the few of us met with some folks, and they were saying one of the demands of him as a part of his apology was that he had to spend some time at the Holocaust Museum. And one of my great friends and mentors, Reverend Willie Wilson, said, okay, he'll go there and you all come with us to the African American History Museum. We've got to figure out, as two groups that have been oppressed throughout the human history, we've got to figure out how to come together, and we have in many instances in the civil rights movement. But I'm just very, I'm very concerned that we are being forced to compare and promote our pain in a way that is like a sideshow in some respects to the dominant culture, and I'm concerned about it, and I'm endeavoring to speak out about it, probably against advice, but it's just very difficult to be in the seat of leadership and not speak to some of these issues. Deacon Clark?
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. One of the I guess ideas that comes to mind about this latest statements about Kyrie is that there's a sort of track record of things he said in public, and I think in some respects in an undisciplined way as a public person who gets a microphone and has followers on Twitter and so forth and so on. So part of what comes to mind is the notion of people do have free speech, but that doesn't mean you're free from the consequences of saying whatever's on your mind.
Absolutely.
And so I would just think that, and I was thinking of other athletes who have sometimes put their foot in the mouth. I remember when Michael Jordan said the thing about when Black folks were upset with Michael Jordan because of what he didn't do with politics. He famously said that, well, white folks or Republicans buy tennis shoes too. And so I think we have to be careful in terms of endorsing folks as spokespeople, because Kyrie is not my spokesperson. I don't believe his scholarship is sound when it comes to supporting some of the things that he's tried to say. And so I think he's been, unfortunately, he's allowed himself to get painted into a corner of defending things that are indefensible, and so I would, it's unfortunate that I guess the idea of cancellation or whatever that means to people, is that the idea that you don't get to be on Twitter no more is not a punishment. It wasn't his to begin with. Twitter belongs to other people, so it's not as though it's a open forum that is run by the state. And so freedom of speech really is a state issue. The state cannot deprive you of free speech, but these owned podiums and microphones that other people own, they obviously have that, they can, and without it being an issue of your constitutional rights. But having said that, I think I would just encourage people, if they're interested or curious about what that film has to say, take a look at the film. And then if they want to have comments about it, or they want to have a dialogue about it, find some intelligent people to talk about it in a factual way, in a way that sheds light on it, instead of just throws around, ideas that I think that are not well thought out ideas, and that really don't have any basis in scholarship, fact, or even accurate portrayals of history. So I don't want to pose as somebody who's going to defend the indefensible just because he's a brother saying it. So I think that who gets out in the public arena and the comments they make, as a grown man, he has to bear his own weight. And I think it is unfortunate that folks have said, well, now you're penalized and you got to do 6 things in order for us to forgive you. That sounds foolish as well. But I think Kyrie has a track record that sort of is what's at stake, as well as just what has been said, or the movie he points to, or this other film, or this work that's of so-called scholarship that's supposed to be facts about Israel that apparently the writer thinks Black folks don't know. Because I think we can all learn what we want to learn about Israel, about the historical background of Hebrews and Jewish folk, without it being about we have to buy into whatever anybody else says. So I think it's a chance to learn more about it, rather than to pick a side and say, well, Kyrie's right or the ADL is right. I think there's another way. So take the time to get educated yourself before you step into the arena and say whose opinion deserves to be backed up.
I couldn't agree with you more, Deacon Clark. I agree wholeheartedly. And I don't know that much about all of this stuff. All I'm saying is, Black people make stupid comments that shouldn't be made, right? White people make stupid comments that shouldn't be made. My concern is, why does the Black person's stupid comments have greater consequences than the white person's stupid comments? So if you want me to be specific, I can. 45 has said all kinds of crazy stuff. These election deniers are saying all kind of crazy stuff. And there's been direct violence as a result of it. I haven't even thrown a racial part in it totally yet. But why is it that white people can speak and say any and all kinds of things, and there seems to be very little consequences for their rhetoric? As a matter of fact, in some circles, they're celebrated. A Black man says something stupid. We can all agree it's stupid, crazy, outlandish, and he's destroyed. And I think as Black people, we should have a concern about that. In this country, Black people have just as much right to say stupid stuff as white people. Why are the consequences different? That's all I'm saying. Anybody else? Sister Flowers?
Well, Pastor Byrd, I've done some research and a lot of reading about whatever Kyrie said. I would just like to know, what was the statement he made? I've been searching on Facebook, YouTube. I cannot find the statement he made about this particular film. Can anyone tell me what he said? Now, I did read, I think recently on YouTube, that there was a link added for us to view the film.
Right.
But then next to it, there was a statement written, and it read, Hebrews to Negroes. Negroes, look out, or something similar to that.
Wake up or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just, is that what he said? I mean, was that his
I'm not
comment
sure.
about the film?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Reverend Rob had some info on that. Reverend Rob,
I had pulled up some stuff for you, Pastor Byrd. I mean, if we're going to stay in this lane, I can definitely pivot, if you will, to try to give you some insight, so we're all kind of talking from the same place. All he did was post the link to the film, basically. It was with that in a press conference, he started to get pressed more about his stance, if you will, on the film. But it was something that he had just tweeted out, basically, not necessarily as people are deeming it in support of the film, but he just basically tweeted out the link to the film. There was nothing else besides a link. But from that and after game press conferences and such is where all of the other questions started to ensue and assumptions being made about him then being anti-Semitic in support of something that he viewed personally and then tweeted out publicly, if you will. And then also to share on the screen really quickly are the 6 things that he has to do in order to be able to resume play for the Brooklyn Nets right now. So you see the bullet point with the 6 on there, Brother Pastor Kent.
Larger a little bit. I can't even.
Let me see if I can make it a little bit larger for you there, my brother.
This is interesting. This is very interesting to me. I don't think we've seen this. All right.
I'll come back in with one other comment after that.
The Brooklyn
read those 6.
Nets have informed suspended star Kyrie Irving of the 6 action items he must complete in order to return to the franchise in the wake of controversial from him posting a movie link with anti-Semitic material, multiple league sources said. Those steps are as follows. Issue an apology for posting a link to the movie on October 27th. Condemn, and this is all number 1, condemn the harmful and false content and make clear that he does not have anti-Jewish beliefs. 2, complete the anti-hate causes that Irving, the Nets, and the Anti-Defamation League agreed upon in their joint release, including a $500,000 donation toward causes and organizations that work to eradicate hate and intolerance in communities. 3, complete sensitivity training created by the Nets. 4, complete anti-Semitic, anti-hate training designed by the Nets. 5, meet with representatives from the Anti-Defamation League as well as Jewish community leaders in Brooklyn. And 6, after completing 1 to 5, meet with owner Joe, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Say, and lead franchise officials and demonstrate the lessons learned and that the gravity of the harm caused in the situation is understood and provide assurances that this type of behavior will not be repeated. Now, all I'm asking, I ain't asking about the book, the movie, which is based off a book. All I'm asking, when have we ever seen that?
And just to go back again.
Wait a minute. Not only must he apologize, he got to give $500,000. Somebody somewhere done bumped their head. Now, come on, y'all. When have you seen that? Where have you seen that for anybody else?
Just going back, Pastor Byrd, it's not that he said anything. He posted a link. So just that's all I wanted to clarify. I'm gonna shut up now.
I'm just saying, where have we seen anybody? Somebody come on and help me with this. Where have we seen that done to folks? Come on, man. Come on, y'all come on up. Minister Vance, where have we seen that? I'm just saying. Come on, man.
We have never seen it. And it's just another example of the inequity that runs rampant. First of all, my opinion, this is Donna's opinion, sports teams have become modern day slavery. And this story, this issue has so many tentacles, but in my opinion, the teams have become modern day slaves, team members. And they're like, you offended us, so now you're going to do everything to further dehumanize yourself in this society so that it lifts us up and pushes you further down. That's one. Two, the other problem I have is Rolling Stone magazine, in response to this whole debacle, ran a story that not only lambasted Kyrie Irving, but it said that the things that it listed that in the movie and said were false were actually not false. The movie apparently talked about, Jews owning large shares in the media and in the banking system. Well, is that not true? I mean, Metro Goldwyn Mayer, Dreyfus, Goldman Sachs.
I think the one big one though that they which I would agree with is that if it says it, I don't know, but they claim that the film questioned the whether or not the Holocaust ever happened. That's amazing. That I don't know, I didn't see it, but that was one of the things that it was said that was lifted in the movie. I don't know what you've heard.
That is possibly one of the elements, and I hate that, like you said, you don't like anyone to lessen anyone's pain. The Holocaust happened. We know what happened. Our Holocaust happened as well. But nobody is jumping through hoops. They didn't ask. They asked LeBron James, how do you feel about it? They didn't ask a Jew how they felt about it. So again, it's an example of divide and conquer. We don't mean anything. It's a case again of shut up and dribble. You don't have an opinion worth you to say. And I want you to compromise your opinion for the sake, just because I said so.
Yeah, I don't know, Reverend Rob, if you can pull up what Nick Cannon said. I thought his remarks were interesting, and I know we don't want to, I am concerned that Nick Cannon has to say something about it. Now, I heard something from Al Sharpton, and I understand what Reverend Sharpton was saying, and I'm with him on that. He reserves comment on whatever Kyrie did, but we all should be concerned about how he's being treated. See, look, if a black person, I'm just using this as an example, a black person breaks the law or is arrested, he dies. The white person gets to go to court. Both people have an opportunity for their day in court, right? So I'm not justifying his actions. I am saying are the consequences for his actions in offending Jewish pain seems to be so much greater than any action anybody's ever taken for somebody calling us a nigger, somebody berating our women. I mean, come on, y'all. We at some point, we reading this book and all Dr. King talks about is the dignity of black folk. That black folks somehow are fighting for their dignity in the segregated South, and they starting with these buses. That we have, in this, you read this book, he was celebrating because we have declared that our dignity means something. And so how can we read about that from 1955, 1956, and here we are in 2022, and we're witnessing, and I'm going to say it, we are witnessing what I would consider close to a public lashing. I want to say the other L word, but I'm not. It is a public lashing of a black man for making it, for whatever he did to offend a particular community, a Jewish community. And I don't think anybody's community should be offended. But I think the punishment should meet the crime or the issue, and I think it should be some equity in how we do this. Come on, y'all. All right, go ahead, Sister Lareef, let me stop.
Good evening.
Good evening.
One of the things that I sort of decided to write when I was over to the center, one of my sessions, a plain, simple statement. Be careful how you interpret what you hear, read, or see. However similar things might seem, there's a difference somewhere. Thank you.
That's wise. That's very wise. Thank you for sharing that with us. Let's take a look at what Nick Cannon says, and we'll get to these other people, and then we'll get to the book. I just want you to hear how he referred to it, and I think it's
I can wholeheartedly say I know Kyrie Irving is not anti-Semitic.
When given the chance to say, are you anti-Semitic or not, he didn't say, no, I'm not anti-Semitic. At the press conference, tell us about that movie, why he did. He said, stop dehumanizing me. And the movie is saying white Jews invented the Holocaust and 6 million Jews didn't get killed. Okay, I know that isn't right. Right. There's a gigantic historical record. Jewish people know when you dehumanize us this way, we know what's around the corner.
So in that same statement as those are the tropes that dehumanize Jewish people, the same buck breaking.
What's that? I don't really know what that means, to be perfectly honest.
The slave masters would bring the buck, the one that gets out of line. So all the other slaves would see lash after lash, show them the power to set an example. This is what you must do to fall in line. So when we see the 6 things that Kyrie must do to get his job back, right, that's dehumanizing.
He calls it buck breaking. He uses a
insurance and their roadblocks.
Buck breaking, that you bring the strongest slave out and you make an example of him and you break him so they know that this is what's going to happen to you if you get out of line. Nick Cannon said what they're doing to what's being done to Kyrie Irving is like buck breaking. And I want us to see this. 2 marginalized, historically oppressed groups are oppressing each other or are joining in with the oppressive system to oppress another out of sheer ignorance. And at some point, the only winner is the oppressive system that's oppressing both of us. Do you think the NBA cares? Don't get me started on that. Do you really think they care? Do you think, look at the NFL, do you really think they care about these oppressed peoples and these issues? They've been forced to deal with some of these things, and people were mad at Jay-Z, but look what's happening. They're being forced to deal with some of these issues that have existed in sports forever. Yeah, they paying you money. They paying you all kinds of money, but they ain't paying you what they making. And that's business. I ain't mad at nobody, but all I'm saying is, what are Jews and black people gaining from assisting the oppressor in hurting somebody? What are we learning, going back to what Deacon Clark said, about anti-Semitism? We don't know nothing about anti-Semitism because the Palestinian people are Semitic people too. I don't have to go to the Hebrews. I don't have to talk anything about the Hebrews and the original Jews and their color. I don't have to talk about that. Let's talk about the color issue today in their same country. Let's talk about the colored people in the Israel-Palestinian area today. Those people are Semitic people. All those Nile Valley region people are considered Semitic people, not just the Jews. So is it anti-Semitic for the Jews in the state of Israel, who are primarily the descendants of European Jews who were brought there because of what happened with the Holocaust? Are those folks not being anti-Semitic to the Palestinians? Yes or no? We don't never talk about that, but you wearing Kyrie Irving out. First generation wealth. He don't have nothing but what they gave him in them contracts since he's been in the NBA. Who knows what Kyrie Irving's class was before he came to the NBA? He's a black man, don't have nothing else but that contract you gave him and whatever other ancillary contracts he got. He can't do nothing to no Jewish people. But the people who can do something to the Jewish people are laughing at us because we fighting each other. Now, you know it's foolish. This is absolutely foolish. It's like a cockfight. It's like a rich person watching two idiots beat themselves silly. That's what we're doing with this. That's how I feel about it. Thomas Dudley, go ahead, help you pass out, then we go into this book. Go ahead.
Good evening, Pastor.
Good evening.
See, you say I know you held back on the word. It's a modern day lynching. That's what it is. And let me tell you something else. Kyrie Irving gave a link to the film from Amazon. Why aren't they saying something to Amazon?
Well, my understanding is they sent a letter to Amazon asking them to stop doing something with it. I understand they sent a letter.
Right, they get a letter, but they're not asking Amazon for no $500,000. And they got much more money than Kyrie Irving. And, I just wanted to get that out there. And what Nick Cannon said, that's what they did. That's where lynching come from, Willie Lynch.
That's it.
Willie Lynch would show up to these slaves and get the baddest, strongest man and humiliate him and beat him half to death. And that would put all the other slaves in order, so to speak.
Put them in check.
That's it, Pastor.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you. Reverend Rob, you got some other people on some other platforms. I don't want to miss anybody else's engagement, and then we'll go to Sister Barbara.
You can go ahead to Sister Flowers really quickly. I'm just trying to catch some of the other comments that are out here. Basically, just a lot of affirmation of what's being discussed here and what people are saying here live online. So please, if you're on Facebook, YouTube, or on our Zion DC page, you definitely put in your comments. I'm trying to catch those as well for Pastor Byrd on this evening. Sister Flowers, you're up. You can unmute and go ahead on and jump on in.
I think you put your hand down, but you didn't unmute. Sister Flowers.
Sister Lowry, go ahead. We'll come back to Sister Flowers.
Hey, good evening, everybody.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, I'm really thankful. I'm doing well. Thank you so much. This conversation has I think Minister Vance made mention of, it's got a lot of different, antennae or whatever. It's a lot of moving parts that are happening at the same time. And it's kind of like, now let's sit back and watch them, squalor over it. One of the things that is important for us is to recognize at this moment is that the Church of Jesus Christ has universal answers. And when she does not have one voice, she too is involved with whatever that antenna is: politics, power, money, whatever, call it whatever it is, it's there. And so when she loses her voice, because we cannot come back under the aid of Holy Spirit, because there's only black and white, it's only Jesus Christ or not. So there's so many methodologies, there's so many incredible ways to address something like that through power, because the church is planted in the United States to a point that she is very powerful, but it's only when she does not have the same universal voice. So that's a big part, and that's where we fall apart, because we're talking about like the Southern Church, just all where our hands are found in the pot they don't belong in. So now we can't even call something out because we don't want to be called out.
That's it.
And the other side of the lynching, and these things are allowed to happen because the church does not have her voice. So these are the conditions wherewith these things are able to happen. And so I saw that and I just said, making an example, because you perceive that you own, these are chattel. These are talented, skilled players, but you know what? We still own them, and we will get them in line, and we will do what is necessary to keep whatever that thing is, our ratings or our investments or whatever's going on under the table, or you said you were offended and you play a big role in money coming through to us. So I'll get this one in line. Don't worry. I'll make an example of him, and we'll get this thing back and everybody will be well. But it all has to go back to the church because that's who Christ planted. He planted her church, his church. That's my belief.
Amen. Thank you for that. Good to hear your voice. There were some others. I don't know where they went.
The other thing that I had your sister Jackie Byrd tell me, who said that basically this is ridiculous and we need to start our own team. This is demeaning to every Black person, especially to Black men. So I did want to catch that. And definitely Sister Russell over on YouTube, who had said she wanted to thank you all for being so eloquent and letting the Lord kind of lead and guide you. And just my last piece here, Pastor, that I'll just kind of throw in really quickly as we kind of segue, I guess, here over to Dr. King, and just kind of on the heels of what Sister Lowry had just said. Without us kind of driving sometimes the narrative of things that we deem important within our own community, I do look at where we are maybe not as focused as we need to be on certain things, and then holding the standard to be the standard across the board. So while we really don't have control over the media, if you will, I think that there are things that we can do to kind of highlight certain things that are there. And I guess unfortunately as well, I would say probably in sports, especially in the NBA, I wish that, as Dr. Clark had brought up a little bit earlier with Michael Jordan, for instance, and saying that, yes, Democrats and Republicans, if you will, Blacks and whites buy shoes. But I wish that we would understand the same way that we can go up, we'll see the same people on the way down. And while it's Kyrie today, for somebody that may have more influence like a LeBron in today's league, if we don't have that voice, then we don't realize sometimes that it may be us next, because we do share the same skin. And if we feel that we are exonerated, if you will, or not able to be penalized, if you will, if we're the golden boy, if you will, at the time, that's something that can kind of be dangerous, if you will, as well. So we do have to kind of understand that. Lastly, I'll say, ironically, with all of this going on in sports, we don't have the same venom, if you will, for someone who stole several $1 million out of the poorest state in this country. Hall of Fame quarterback, enshrined in Canton, if you will. But there's nothing being said, if you will, for one Brett Favre, who has taken numerous dollars from poor people to enrich something that he probably could have built out of pocket, but between he and the government of that state conspired to take from an already decimated place that needs help, that has a water infrastructure problem, yet we have not seen anything in terms of restitution or anything else like that. I don't hear that he is being kicked out of Canton or anything else, anything being done with his pension or anything else of that nature. So sometimes, again, we need to determine what we consider to be newsworthy as we do certain things, and have, again, the voice of the church to be able to cry out for the least, the lost and the left out, and probably a great place for us to be able to pivot right now into a leader that saw things, if you will, and may not have had all the public accolades at the time, but still saw the needs and was ground level with the people and trying to help his people move forward under oppressive times. And Dr. King.
Absolutely. And going back to Brett Favre, because that's a good point. I didn't know this, but Mississippi is the poorest state in the union.
Dead last, absolute poorest.
And he's taking from, I forget what the benefit was in the budget for a recreational facility. I'm just, and see, when you get on this stuff, we should have spoken out more about the situation with Michael Vick. I'm just being honest. If we're going to be the church militant, Michael Vick was kicked out of football for a while because he engaged in dogfighting, right? That was his sin. And it was against the rules, and they were fighting, and all of the PETA and all the people came out, and we are so sorrowful for the dogs that lost their lives in the course of that and how they were treated. That's Michael Vick, right? Ben Roethlisberger. Y'all remember that? Remember what he did to that child? That girl? Was Ben Roethlisberger ever suspended? I just want us to hear this. That's all I'm saying. For some reason, if you got a little hue in your skin, your consequences are so much greater than everybody else's. And to me, the Kyrie Irving thing is a problem. Not that I'm defending what he said, what he did. Oh, I'm not even getting into that. I just want to understand, why are his consequences so much greater than other people who've done similar? Including the former president of the United States, including members of Congress. We've seen the direct result of their rhetoric and their foolishness, and oh, well, let the voters decide. You ain't let the voters decide with Kyrie. You're asking this man to give $500,000 up? And then when black people start talking about reparations, everybody gets upset. Who gonna give us some money back for what we've lost? Since we do believe in reparations when it comes to Jewish people, we don't believe in it when it comes to black people. When has anybody ever made, as a consequence, give $500,000 to the NAACP, to the Urban League, to the SCLC, to some black church or some black program in a community? When have you ever seen that? Have you seen that? I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I haven't seen it. We should be outraged by this. Listen, I can be outraged about the consequences that you place on somebody and not be supportive of whatever act that they did. I can distinguish those two. I think black people are intelligent enough and smart enough to do that. Black people by nature don't want nobody to get hurt. So nobody in the world is going to advocate for you saying something that's going to hurt somebody and somebody's people. That's not who we are as black people generally, and I know I'm being general. That's not who we are. So nobody's supporting that. But we got to stop letting our people just be poo-pooed on, and nobody says anything. No, we got to say something about it, even if we have to say something to the Anti-Defamation League. And I would like to know, just in case I get a text or email from ADL, I would like to know what their position is on the Palestinians. As Semitic people, educate me. I am seeking an education because I was trained by the late, great Dr. Cain Hopefelder, and I did study the Nile Valley region. And those persons, in addition to the Jewish people, all of those persons were considered Semitic people because they all had the same basic religious practices and the same basic languages. Now, that's what I was taught at the Mecca, Howard University, by the way, School of Divinity. So if there's some education that I need, help me with that. Because all of those people were Semites, which means that the original people who occupied Palestine were Semitic people. They are descendants of Semitic people. So when you kick them out of their land and put them behind checkpoints, you are therefore, in the truest sense of the word, I got a professor over here, are being anti-Semitic. And the same way I get on my people, don't start running around here telling me Black Lives Matter and we can't curb black on black murder. Same thing I tell my Jewish brothers. How can you stand for anti-Semitism around the world and miss it right where it counts with the Palestinian people? So I'm open to an education on that. I'll go to the Holocaust Museum again, and you come with me to the African American Museum, because I don't think we should be shaming each other on the amount of pain that we've had at the hands of a common oppressor. It's ridiculous, and we need to stop it. We are better together. All right, Dr. King, help us in this nonviolent, because I feel violence rising up. Help me. Let's get back to some nonviolent conversation. No, I'm just joking. I don't feel violence rising up. I'm going to be disciplined and dignified, as Dr. King suggests and modeled in his life. Hopefully, I just think these current events help us to understand how amazing the Montgomery story is, and how wonderful it is that Dr. King was able to lead in the way he did. I just have a couple of areas tonight. I do have an assignment for Dr. Campbell, so I'm glad he's here. I mentioned this last week, and I'm going to deal mostly. I'm going to deal mostly with chapter 9. But there's one thing I wanted to ask Dr. Campbell. You remember when we were talking, and this is the only thing I'm going to deal with in chapter 8. We're out of chapter 8. But I mentioned it last week that Dr. King was he was in Tennessee giving a series of lectures, and Coretta and the family stayed with his parents, and so he went back to Atlanta to pick them up, the family up, and then was going to head back to Montgomery, and his father didn't want him to leave. And last week we mentioned those persons who his daddy called to the house to have a talk with him. And I don't know obviously I know Dr. Mays, we know a lot about Dr. Mays, but I didn't know if you knew any of the other names. In my book, it's on the top of page 145, and I just want to call these names out to you.
I think you had Clement Milton, which was a druggist, they're a businessman.
Let me see what I said. You said who?
Rufus Clement was the president of Atlanta University. Benjamin Mays, president of Morehouse.
Right.
May have had Alexander, I don't know if they had T.M. Alexander or not.
T.M. Alexander was a prominent businessman. C.R. Yates.
And Yates owned a big drugstore right near Morehouse. So these were...
A.T. Walden? Does that name ring? A.T. Walden says he was an attorney.
Walden is the only one
you're not familiar with. And Bishop Sherman Green.
And I'm not familiar with him either.
But when I looked at this, I said, this is a who. I mean, this is. I said it last week. I'll say it again. This is Black excellence at its best.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? The fact that Dad, we affectionately call Daddy King, had the presence to do that.
Was acting as a father.
Yeah.
The father's concerned about a son, not a civil rights leader or anything like that, but he's talking, flesh and blood. And I don't think he didn't want him to return.
Right.
And therefore pulled in people that he recognized and respected. As I said before, you've got the president of Morehouse College, who had a great deal of influence
over Dr. King.
King, along with Mordecai Johnson.
Right.
That they were cut
of Howard University.
Yes, right. He didn't have to call him in on that. He had enough folks locally to handle the matter. But Dr. King stood up on his own, and I think that Dr. Mays really realized that. Yeah.
I think I'm just impressed by the fact that his father, it says something about his stature, obviously in the community, that these persons, I mean, I guess these are all professional people, he could call on them. And what does it say about kind of the community or the village from which Dr. King emerges out of? It says a lot about it.
It does.
In terms of who he is, to have all these people around him. I just thought that was just amazing that he could just,
a powerful group.
Oh my God, the who's who.
But and what we see in the remaining chapters is that his vision starts to, it becomes enlarged.
Right.
He saw himself as the leader of the Montgomery bus boycott at one point in time. And then, of course, 1956, January 1956, just after the Supreme Court ruling,
right,
he turns his sights toward the larger Southern Christian community when he formed the Southern Christian Leadership Council, SCLC.
Right.
I think that was in January or February of just about a month or so after the ruling came down.
Right.
So then, it starts to widen. And then, of course, we know 64, he starts to think, well, 64 and 68, the Vietnam. He's
Right.
now become a member of the world community.
The world community.
Your problems are my problems. And
Right.
this is something that we've been talking about for the past few minutes or so. Your pain, feeling the pain of others, that I'm a part, that when one suffers,
We all
suffer.
We all should feel the pain.
And that's what it's.
And that's powerful. This is the day after Election Day in America, midterm elections. And we've seen a lot of rhetoric, we've seen a lot of stuff, and it looks like it's a mixed bag. It looks like the country has rejected some of the foolishness on a larger scale, depending upon the candidates. But I want to read about the indignities on the bus that are spelled out, things that happened to black folks who were riding on the buses in Mississippi, the kind of indignities they suffered. And I hope we haven't become used to indignities to the point where we may not have suffered them at this point, but there's some indignities going on. I think what's happening with Kyrie is an indignity. I think it's well, just listen to some of these things. I didn't give Reverend Rob these pages earlier, so he doesn't know. I don't know what the equivalent page is, but these are when he starts talking about the abuses on the buses. These are the people who testified in court when they had to go to court. And they got up and they began to testify about what they experienced on the buses. He said perhaps the most touching testimony was that of Miss Stella Brooks. Her husband had climbed on a bus. After paying his fare, he was ordered by the driver to get off and reboard by the back door. He looked through the crowded bus and seeing that there was no room in back, he said that he would get off and walk if the driver would return his dime. The driver refused. An argument ensued, and the driver called the police. The policeman arrived, abusing Brooks, who still refused to leave the bus until his dime was returned. The policeman shot him. It happened so suddenly that everybody was dazed. Brooks died of his wounds. Got on the bus, paid his dime, and they would have to get off the bus and go and get on the back door. But there was no seats back there. So he said, okay, just give me my dime back, I'll leave. The driver wouldn't give him his dime back, so he didn't leave. So he called the police. We'll call the police. I paid you for a service that I'm not getting, so give me my dime back. The police gets there and shoots him, and he ends up dying. He goes on to say, Miss Martha Walker testified about the day when, listen to this, when she was leading her blind husband from the bus. She had stepped down, and as her husband was following, the driver slammed the door and began to drive off. Walker's leg was caught. Although Mrs. Walker called out, the driver failed to stop, and her husband was dragged some distance before he could free himself. She reported the incident, but the bus company did nothing about it. A blind man, page 136. Thank you, Reverend Ron. A blind man getting off the bus. He closes his leg up in the bus and pulls off and drags him. And drags him. It's kind of stuff folks went through. Says the stories continue. Mrs. Sadie Brooks testified that she heard a Negro passenger threatened because he did not have the correct change. The driver whipped out a pistol and drove the man off the bus. Miss Della Perkins described being called an ugly black ape by a driver. I'm talking about indignities that black people have suffered. Says, I will always remember my delight when Mrs. Georgia Gilmore, an unlettered woman of unusual intelligence, told how an operator demanded that she get off the bus after paying her fare and board it again by the back door, which was not uncommon, and then drove away before she could get there. Told her to get off the bus, get on the back door. When she got off the bus, he pulled off. These are the kind, people got shot, threatened, called out their name. These are the kind of indignities that black folks were suffering in Montgomery on the buses, way before the Rosa Parks incident. I mean, man got shot simply because he wanted his money back. And all I'm saying is we can't go back. I hear you, Dr. Lewis Anthony. The second slavery is going to be worse than the first. We cannot let up on any gains as it relates to our dignity as a people. And I believe I can be pro-Black without being anti-anybody else. So I'm not speaking of anybody else. I'm talking about my people. We cannot allow ourselves to lose the gains and whatever level of respect for our dignity we have gained. And we've got to help our young people understand that. Many of them are fighting this fight and they feel like they're fighting it without us. But some of our young people are pulling us back because they go in establishments and they don't know how to act. They run into challenges and they don't know how to address the challenges in a way that brings attention to the injustice rather than to them. And I'm open for any comments on this. When we get to chapter 9, when they get to federal court with this thing, make sure this is where I wanted to. They get to federal court and think they're going to have a fair shake because they talk about the local courts are so biased, but they now feel better because they're in federal court, and they decide to change their strategy and go against segregation itself and its constitutionality, and they bring up Plessy versus Ferguson. And one of the things I wanted to bring to our attention, because we're still fighting it, they made their so segregation, my understanding is, and Dr. Campbell, you can help me with this, that's the basis for segregation was the Plessy versus Ferguson case. That as long as the accommodations were equal, they could be separate. And so segregationist laws were based on this, and even though in the education area it was repealed, I think in 1954, somewhere around there, I don't know if that was Brown versus Board of Education or not, that aspect of separate but equal to desegregate the schools was appealed, they changed that part. He calls it, they refer to it as the Plessy doctrine still was the mainstay to support segregation laws throughout the South. And so what they came to understand as a matter of strategy is that they had to attack the constitutionality of segregation laws and then catch the bus up in that, because the way they were going at it, the segregation laws would always go against what they were trying to get in terms of open seating on the buses. So I think that was a good strategy, very smart move on their part, and to take it to the federal court to do that. What I wanted to bring our attention to is the 14th Amendment and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. I think this is important for us today. They won their case. It was appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld the decision. They won their case and got the buses desegregated on the basis of the equal protection under the law of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America. We are still dealing with equal protection under the law because both Roe versus Wade and and I won't even deal with the same-sex piece because I know people get upset, but both of those issues have been, for now, or were settled in law based on equal protection under the law, or based on this equal protection clause under the 14th Amendment. That's what people argue when they go to court, that the states are not allowed to pass any laws that would violate anybody's equal protection under the law. And I'm not a lawyer, that's page 144. I'm not a lawyer, but the reason I bring this up is because the issues that were argued back in 1955 and 1956 by Dr. King and the lawyers that were working for the Montgomery Improvement Association are the same issues that we're dealing with today with Roe v. Wade and some of the other things that a Republican Congress has already said that if they regain power, that they would attack. And they've already shown an ability to do that with Roe v. Wade. We are still fighting the same issues years and years later, 60 plus years later. That's all. I'm just saying that it's crazy that we're still having this fight, and we have got to pay attention to it. And when I talk about we, I'm not just talking about black people. I'm talking about Christians. I'm talking about people who believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm talking about people who understand that the gospel must, if the gospel is true anywhere, it must be true everywhere, and it must apply to all people. And we must stand firmly not on our political views, but what King did, he stood for righteousness on his biblical views, his Christian views. And we got to stop compartmentalizing that and seeing it's one and all. It's all of this. That's why Dr. King could not turn his back on it, could not ignore it, could not go on with his life and watch it happen, because he kept being pulled back by his faith, his total appreciation for the teachings of Jesus Christ and the love of his own people. And to me, that's at the core of this church militant piece. If Gandhi was his methodology for nonviolence, then King is our methodology for the Christian social gospel. He shows us a methodology of how to be true to the tenets of the gospel of Jesus Christ and how to confront oppression and oppressive systems. And I just hope we're seeing that in this particular account, but also in what we're facing today. That's why I bring Kyrie up. It's a current event that deals with the struggle continuing and how we have to continue to be vigilant. And we have those persons, he always talks about this person is unlettered, and the people who got letters and the people who have a sense of what's going on and have the resources and the wherewithal have got the talent and intent, have got a responsibility to move us, to remind us, to share with us, to convict us. And our young people are crying out for us to give them leadership in this area. I think if we don't, I just don't want us to miss this. God knows I don't want to miss it. Yes, sir, Reverend Rob.
Well, I put a comment in the chat, and then I'll go into a question with it. I asked if we're still fighting the same issues, and one way, and I'm bringing it up because it seems like if we can find contentment in our comfort and no longer see the need to confront injustices. And I'm thinking of two different people who, again, are my skin folk, but I don't know that they're kinfolk anymore. And I'm thinking of a young Clarence Thomas who got to where he was based on certain, yeah, okay, so you know one of where I'm going. And then I think of a Candace Owens who was helped out by the NAACP, but now is, stumping for Donald Trump and everything else out here, but forgets that the NAACP helped and believed her in the face of things that she was facing with school. So there's such a danger, if you will, in the short-term memory. And that's all that I'm saying. I'm just saying what I'm saying. I'm going to be quiet up here, but
that's where we are. And I was just getting ready to go to this guy. This is so important. The young guy, Reverend U.J. Fields. And I was going to ask Dr. Cam if he knew something about Reverend U.J. Fields, who for whatever reason, he was in the MIA, he was in the office, and they voted him out of his office. For whatever reason, he lost his office. And he goes, you all read this in chapter 9, he goes to the press, and not only does he resign, but he makes all of these accusations on his way out the door. So his thing is, I'm gonna tell you, look, if I can't have a part of it, I'm gonna tear the whole house down. Any knowledge about Reverend Fields? Apparently he was a younger minister, pastor of the...
I think was he the corresponding secretary of the MIA?
Yes, of Bell Street Baptist Church.
Yes, Bell Street Baptist, yes. And he accused them of misappropriating funds, using money to line their own palaces or whatever. In the end, because he was really concerned about it, I think the King and Abernathy were out in California vacationing for the first time. And then all of a sudden they get this information about Fields and what he had said to the press. And of course, later, he rescinded it all.
Right.
That it wasn't, that they weren't misappropriating, because if that had proven to be true, then, the donations would have dried up and movement over.
But did you know of him in the community at that time? I know you were young.
No, I knew of it at the time that it was happening, but I didn't. He was a younger person. I'm not sure that he was there very long after that. Of course, his congregation immediately voted him out.
Right.
But then, of course, they
took him
changed
back.
that. Yeah,
right.
They did. I don't know how long he was there, but out of that, out of the heap and ashes that could have potentially happened, really it moved them forward. They were even more united.
Right.
The forces of evil from within and without, when they were confronted with them, it made them stronger.
Right.
As a group. And this was just one of those instances when the MIA became stronger as an organization because of this kind of dissension from within.
And isn't it something how a disgruntled leader or two can stymie an entire movement?
Jealousy, and he says it.
He says it.
Jealous,
he was upset with a couple of people, and he just. But I just want us to hear that.
But I mean, all we have to do is look in the mirror.
That's it.
I mean, how many of us have felt the same kind of way when someone gets attention, gains attention, and you aren't?
A disgruntled leadership can stymie a whole. That's why leaders have to be so careful with themselves. I teach a class for Missionary Bible, Maple Springs Baptist College and Seminary on leadership and administration. And one of the things that I'm teaching in this book by one of my professors at Wesley deals with the integrity of the leader. It deals with organizational integrity, but it also deals with the integrity of the leader. And it talks about your own, your personal integrity and your own spiritual investment. Dr. Weems will beat me up. I'm probably putting some words in his mouth. But to that extent, that's what he talks about in his book, Church Leadership. And he has these components of effective leadership. And when you're not in tune with yourself as a leader, it will lend itself to some level of being disgruntled. I want to think about that. Your own insecurities, your own vulnerabilities, and all of us have them. It will lend you in any organization that you're part, certainly in the church, to be disgruntled. And a disgruntled leader can stymie an entire cause. Perry Smith used to say, as they were trained in the civil rights movement, they always said the cause is greater than the person. And they had to recite that. The cause is greater than the person. The cause is greater than the person. So that no one or two or three people would stymie the cause, but that the cause had to keep going forward. And it's interesting how people are trained that with a certain intentionality in the civil rights movement. Well, we need to have that same thought in church. That the cause of Christ, that the ministry, that the work that's going forward is greater than any one person. And so I just thought that was interesting how this disgruntled guy could have, he posed a greater threat than the commission in them, because he gave that information from within. And I think if he hadn't got the kind of response that he gotten, he might have not recanted. Church voted him out. The people wanted to kill him. Dr. King brought him before the people to save his life.
In fact, in his prayer, I think it was King praying or so, and he mentioned in the prayer about forgiving Fields. I mean, people sitting up in the church.
Those people didn't want to hear that.
No, they didn't. Disagreeing with his prayer.
So look at that traitor sitting up there next to Dr. King. And so we know that ultimately, even while they were in federal court, the decision came back against them as it related to the carpool. That they had to give up the carpool.
Right.
But he also learned at the same time
same day.
about the Supreme Court vacating the law, the segregation laws. So say they were unconstitutional.
You had a dark moment followed by
that's what he
instant light.
says.
Yep, and he said that. And it's really interesting, you know, that I noticed for the first time when I was reading that's Nayo's birthday.
November 13th.
November 13th. She was born on November 13th.
1956. She looks good for her age. I'm just teasing.
40 years later.
Right. Right.
And the Supreme Court ruling came down on December 21st, which is Janet's birthday.
Wow, and my son's birthday is the 22nd. That's real, December 22nd.
It's really interesting. I just noticed that a couple of weeks or so ago as I looked at those dates for the first time.
And then it said the night the Ku Klux Klan rode. Oh, they said, oh, we gotta do something. They getting too happy. We gotta. Boy, this is so much like today.
Was that the January of '57? That wasn't Abernathy's home, was it?
And Deacon Cam, let me get you bring that mic up to your mouth there.
Okay, yeah.
Flash it.
No, this wasn't the Abernathy home one yet.
Okay, yeah, that came after the Supreme Court, about a month after the Supreme Court ruling in '56.
In '56.
Yeah, about January 9th or 10th, the Abernathy's home was bombed.
Right.
And that's an event that stuck out in my mind because he's right around the corner from me. And
so you remember that?
Oh, absolutely. You don't forget those kinds of things. That was, how old was I? My grandfather just passed. In fact, January 1 of '57. Father had just come back to Montgomery, and it was in the evening. It must have been, seemed like it was 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, you know, the house just shook.
You remember your house shaking?
Oh, yeah. Well, it was the distance from here. My home was a distance from here to 17th Street from Reverend Abernathy's home.
Oh, wow.
So it was right around the corner.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was, oh, boy. You know, the rest of that night, and talking about being unsettled and then thinking about those kinds of things. And
you remembered your house shaking from a
oh,
bomb?
my. I mean, just can still feel and remember those things. Yeah. You just don't. And there are pictures. In fact, I had taken down one from online of Reverend Abernathy's home following the bombing. You could see what it did. She was in the, may have been in the, well, she was probably asleep just as I was. It was in the early morning or so. They bombed his home. They bombed the church. They bombed Bell Street.
Right.
Reverend Gratt's home, all that same night.
Yeah.
Yeah, bombing. That
So
should have been
they
bombing
talk about the Klan rioting. I just want to read this section, and I know we're running a little bit over time. I'm going to read this section, and we're going to come out. It says, the night the Ku Klux Klan rode, the radio had announced their plan. I just want us to hear the similarities, that's all. The radio had announced their plan to demonstrate throughout the Negro community, and threats of violence and new bombings were in the air. My mail was warning that if you allow the niggas to go back on the buses and sit in the front seats, we're going to burn down 50 houses in one night, including yours. Another letter cursed the Supreme Court and threatened that damn Hugo Black. When he comes back to Alabama, we're going to hang you and him from the same tree. It goes on to say, ordinarily threats of Klan action were a signal to the Negroes to go into their houses, close the doors, pull the shades, or turn off the lights. Fearing death, they played dead. But this time, they had prepared a surprise. When the Klan arrived, according to the newspapers, about 40 carloads of robed and hooded members, porch lights were on and doors open. As the Klan drove by, the Negroes behaved as though they were watching a circus parade. Concealing the effort it cost them, many walked about as usual. Some simply watched from their steps. A few waved at the passing cars. After a few blocks, the Klan nonplussed turned off into a side street and disappeared into the night. The Proud Boys. They just intimidate you, scare you half to death. It's probably, well, I ain't gonna say that. But it's probably the Citizens Council in hoods. Isn't that what's happening now? Do you think we're being intimidated by the Proud Boys? What they gonna do? They come.
I need Pastor Byrd. We need you back in the mic, my brother. Thank you.
They come to DC. You know, I'm probably. DC is not the best place for the Proud Boys to come. They need to stay in the South. DC is a tough place. But the hate and the violence, we're still dealing with that. How does that make you feel to have? I mean, you just, and we coming out, y'all. But you just said you remember feeling the vibrations in your home of a bomb that exploded at Dr. Abernathy's house in close proximity to your house, right around the corner.
I had no idea what was happening.
How do you feel when you hear Proud Boys and coming into town, and some of them have burned crosses in front of churches in DC doing demonstrations?
Well, enjoying the protection of the local law officials. I mean, the Proud Boys can come to town and be protected by U.S. Capitol Police, D.C. Police.
Because they have a right to protest.
Because, well,
that's what they say. They got a right to protest.
And not only that, but these are good folks, and you know they're patriots, and you know they aren't going to harm anybody. Well,
I just think it's interesting that we're still doing that. I promise this is the last thing. If you're on this book, there's no way we could get out of whatever chapter I'm in, chapter 9, without, after the desegregation comes down from the Supreme Court, what they sent out to all the black people in terms of how they ought to behave and how they ought to conduct themselves in the event something should happen on the bus, the training that they went through so that people would know if something should arise on the bus. I just think, can I just go through this list real quick, and then I promise you we'll get out of here. We'll be done in a minute. Reverend Rob got to find a page for me. It's on 164 in my book. Integrated bus suggestions. This is after they know the decision's coming down. They're trying to prepare everybody now on how to get back on the buses. What I love about them is they're so intentional. They don't take anything for granted. And they send out these pamphlets so everybody would have them and everybody would know what to do, and there would be a uniform response. And we've talked over and over again since we've been reading this book. Would this work today? Could we get people to follow this uniform response? Could we get people to oblige and do these things so that people will be clear that we're together and that we're one?
158.
158.
We're starting actually on 157.
So it says, this is a historic week because, I'm gonna read this. It says, this is a historic week because segregation on buses has now been declared unconstitutional. Within a few days, the Supreme Court mandate will reach Montgomery and you will be reboarding integrated buses. This places upon us, this is powerful, this places upon us all a tremendous responsibility of maintaining, in face of what could be some unpleasantness, a calm and loving dignity befitting good citizens and members of our race. That's a statement right there. That's a statement right there. We have a responsibility to act like we got some sense now that we've made these gains. Don't make it look like it was all in vain. Do you think we could talk to our people like that today? Dr. Campbell. What kind of response will we get from our folks today?
No end zone dances.
If there is violence in word or deed, it must not be our people who commit it. For your help and convenience, the following suggestions are made. Will you read, study, and memorize? That's what he's telling those people to do. Read, study, and memorize them so our nonviolent determination may not be in danger. Not all white people are opposed to integrated buses except goodwill on the part of many. The whole bus is now for the use of all people. Take a vacant seat. Pray for guidance and commit yourself to complete nonviolence in word and action as you enter the bus. Demonstrate the calm dignity of our Montgomery people in your actions. In all things, observe ordinary rules of courtesy and good behavior. Don't get on there and start no mess. Can't you see them old sisters?
They were capable of it.
Remember that
Definitely
this is not a victory for Negroes alone, but for all Montgomery and the South. Do not boast, do not brag. Be quiet but friendly, proud but not arrogant, joyous but not boisterous. I mean, listen to this. Be loving enough to absorb evil and understanding enough to turn an enemy into a friend. Now for some specific suggestions. The bus driver is in charge of the bus and has been instructed to obey the law. Assume that he will cooperate in helping you occupy any vacancy. Do not deliberately sit by a white person unless there is no other seat. I thought that, let's not press our luck on this thing. In sitting down by a person, white or colored, say, may I, or pardon me as you sit. This is common courtesy. I mean, this is common courtesy. If cursed, do not curse back. If pushed, do not push back. If struck, do not strike back. But evidence love and goodwill at all times. That's tough. In case of an incident, talk as little as possible and always in a quiet tone. Do not get up from your seat. Report all serious incidents to the bus driver. I'm almost done here. For the first few days, try to get on the bus with a friend in whose nonviolence you have confidence. You can uphold one another by a glance or a prayer. If another person is being molested, do not arise to go to his defense, but pray for the oppressor and use moral and spiritual force to carry on the struggle for justice. That's tough. According to your own ability and personality, do not be afraid to experiment with new and creative techniques for achieving reconciliation and social change. And finally, number 9, if you feel you cannot take it, walk for another week or 2. We have confidence in our people. God bless you all. If you can't do it, keep on walking. I just think it's amazing how intentional they were, the kind of direction they gave, and the fact that it must have worked because people, by and large, followed these instructions and these suggestions. But the mere fact that they were intentional enough to do it is just so interesting to me. Any last minute comments? It's 8:29. We try to end at 8:15, but I apologize. I got off on a rant early on dealing with the Kyrie Irving piece. Any last minute questions or comments about anything we've read? We're going to get into chapter 10, Montgomery today, and of course that would be Montgomery back then. And then we're going to really spend some time in where do we go from here in chapter 11. Yes.
In that next paragraph, they're speaking about the white ministers and their response. By and large, they refuse to urge their congregations to support the court's decision.
Right.
You know, the white ministers, the church.
That's it. Still divided.
The Bible, yes.
Still divided. Still divided. That's just amazing to me. Sister Flowers, I see Sister Flowers.
Yeah.
I just want to say, Pastor, I laughed all the way through the rules that you read.
Isn't that amazing? What did you think about them?
Can you imagine all teenagers getting on the bus following such rules? Can you imagine that?
They must have done it though. I just
Not
thought that was
today.
amazing.
Not today.
No, not today.
That was so funny.
I just thought that was the most interesting thing that they would even do that. But they were together.
Yeah, they were together, all
They
right.
were together. Thank you for sharing that. And plus, it's always good to hear you laughing.
I'll just say this, if you can get that to happen on the X2, Brother Pastor, you can make that happen on the X2 where we're pulling people off the bus and doing other stuff, then God bless you, sir.
Oh,
If you
Lord.
Just
Oh,
get
Lord.
it just on the X2.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. Thank you for your participation. We got a lot of comments and participation. Let's just keep being prayerful, keep being mindful, and following some of these instructions. Continue to be polite, to let the Spirit of Christ be evident in us wherever we go, to be mindful of other people, other people's feelings, and how other people are being treated. We can't truly represent and demand our own dignity and self-worth if we can't also support other people in demanding theirs as well, whether they be Jewish, Latino, whatever. And so we are always, and we don't take anybody's plight lightly. And at the same time, fair is fair. And so hopefully our comments tonight and all that was shared tonight were taken in that context. We should be concerned about people everywhere. I believe it was Dr. King, and I don't want to butcher his quote, injustice, what is it? A threat to justice anywhere, a threat to justice. Somebody help me with this quote. A threat to justice,
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Say that again.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we have to believe that, and just live that out. And so my prayer is that you were enriched by our reading. Keep on reading. We're almost at the end, and we will see you again next week. Keep on praying that all these ballots get counted, and we'll see how this turns out. But one thing we do know is that the Lord is not running for any office. He was not on the ballot last night, and he's still yet on the throne. And for that, we have great hope and expectation. All right. Good night, everybody. I love you, and the Lord loves you best. Have a good evening.
1. Good morning, worshipers.
We thank you for joining Zion Baptist Church's Wednesday evening Bible study under the instruction of our pastor, Reverend Dr. Keith W. Byrd, Sr.
This means so much. It's making me better, just making me a better person, and I want more.
If this is your first time or you are a regular, please visit ziondc.org for more information and ways to stay connected. Also, you can see several different ways to support our ministry and contribute online financially. Lastly, please make sure to follow us online and across social media at Zion Baptist DC to see what we have to offer. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to connecting with you again. Be blessed.